Welcome to Revenge Report. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Let's dive in. My name is Fiona Rourke. I'm 43 years old, and I live in Seattle. On the night everything shifted, I was standing under a blown glass chandelier, holding a crystal flute of champagne, giving a speech I hadn't rehearsed. Tonight, I said, smiling at the sea of tailored suits and polished shoes, isn't about me. It's about us, about what this company dares to dream. I was lying. It was definitely about me. The promotion to Chief of Strategic Programs had taken me 15 years, 4 continents, and countless red-eye flights to earn. The board had finally approved it 2 weeks ago, and someone, likely Vincent, decided to throw a gala. It was black tie, invitation only, with names like Lockheed and Dassault on the guest list. Even the ice cubes were hand-chiseled. I had just raised my glass, about to toast the engineering team, when I saw her, Celeste. She stood near the back of the ballroom, framed in gold-trimmed double doors, like she'd walked straight out of a dream. Or a nightmare. Her dress was red, bright red, too short, too tight, and far too loud for a room filled with muted elegance. She looked good, objectively, but I could already hear the whispers starting around the room. Is that her sister? Wait, the one from the hospital incident? I thought she lived in Miami. Celeste pushed through the crowd like she was late to a show that had started without her. Her heels clicked against the marble floor. I didn't move, my whole body locked. She hadn't spoken to me in nearly 4 years. What a beautiful speech, she called out, loud enough to stop a waiter in his tracks. Just one problem. I heard gasps before I felt the heat rising up my neck. You forgot to thank the person who taught you how to command a room. Celeste, I said. My voice came out steady, too calm. This isn't the time, she laughed. Of course it is. You think I flew all this way for crab cakes and war contracts? Someone in the front row shifted awkwardly. A VP from Northrop muttered, Jesus. You always loved a stage, Celeste said, walking right up to me now. Even when we were kids, you were the one with the hairbrush mic. I just stood there clapping. Her smile was feral. And here you are, still clapping for yourself. I didn't know what she was going to do. Honestly, I didn't think she'd get close enough to touch me. But then, she did. She reached out and shoved me. Not hard. Not enough to knock me over. But enough. Enough to send a ripple of shock across the room like someone had detonated an invisible bomb. I didn't stumble. I didn't raise my hands. I just stood there, frozen, while my sister looked like she'd won something. Then I heard it, a voice I knew by rhythm alone. Touch my fiancé again, he said. Calm, controlled, but deadly. And it's the last thing you'll ever regret. The room collectively turned. Vincent Dre, the company's COO, my closest ally, the man who had flown with me to Tel Aviv in coach because I didn't want to waste a single budget line, the man who always walked 3 steps behind, never ahead, until now. He stepped beside me, jaw tight, eyes burning, and said it again. Fiancé! That word. It hit the room like a grenade. And it hit me harder, because I didn't know he was going to say it. I didn't even know he thought it. Celeste stared at him, then at me. Then she laughed like she didn't believe him, like she was the only one in the room who saw through it. But she took a step back. Vincent didn't flinch, and neither did I. I stepped out onto the balcony like I was walking off stage. The city stretched beneath me, glass and grid, the whole skyline blinking back at me like nothing had happened. The air was cool, not cold, just sharp enough to remind me I was still in my body. Somewhere behind me, the gala was either recovering or collapsing. I didn't care which. My hands were still clenched. I didn't remember walking out. I just remembered the sound of that word, fiancé, and the way it hung in the room like it had been waiting to be said, not whispered, declared. I hadn't planned on crying. I never do. But something about standing alone with champagne still fizzing in my throat made my eyes burn. Not from sadness, from shame. That was the point, wasn't it? Celeste didn't come to confront me. She came to humiliate me, and it worked. Don't throw the glass, Vincent said behind me, his voice quiet. I hadn't heard the door open. He stood just inside the frame, hands in his pockets, no jacket now. His tie loosened like he was suddenly human. I looked at the flute in my hand. I hadn't realized I was holding it so tight. I wasn't going to throw it, I said. Good, he said, because it would have hit a Bentley. I almost smiled. Almost. He walked toward me slowly, stopping a few feet away. I shouldn't have said that. The thing in there. Which part? I asked. The threat or the engagement announcement? He exhaled a dry breath. Both. I nodded once, sharp. So it was just strategy. Yes, my jaw locked. I didn't want it to escalate. He continued. She was trying to draw blood, and when people like her can't get attention, they'll take control instead. I gave them something louder. I turned toward him then, fully. Did you think I needed rescuing? No, he said immediately. I thought you deserved insulation. Insulation, not protection, not pity. Something else. You called me your fiancé, I said, my voice low, in front of every executive, board member, and private equity investor on this coast. That word wasn't neutral, Vincent. You don't use that word unless it's either real or manipulative. I know, he said. Then he looked at me, finally, really looked. But no one, he said, should be humiliated for being exceptional, least of all you. That was the first time I didn't know what to say. We stood in silence, the kind that doesn't demand anything, but still weighs heavy. The city buzzed below us. Inside, I could hear laughter starting up again. Fake, thin, necessary. The event would go on. The narrative would write itself. But out here, something shifted. Not romance, not clarity, just potential. Vincent leaned against the railing, not looking at me. We can fix the headline, he said, if that's what you want. I looked back at the door, then at him. Maybe, I said, but not tonight. And neither of us moved. The envelope was matte black, no return address, no stamp. Just my name, Fiona Rourke, in silver foil lettering, hand-delivered to my front desk at 7:38 a.m. on a Friday. I knew before I opened it that something was wrong. Inside, a single sheet of company letterhead, printed and signed by an HR representative I barely knew. The words were cool and sparse, but they didn't need to scream. Their weight landed hard enough as is. Subject: internal review notification. I skimmed it twice, then a third time, certain I had misread it. Accusations: ethical misconduct, intimidation, abuse of influence, alleged coercive behavior toward junior staff, manipulation of project approvals, unprofessional favoritism toward the COO. There was more. A secondary attachment, a USB drive sealed in its own tiny black sleeve, submitted by a verified third-party whistleblower, supporting documentation attached. I sat down, not on my chair, on the floor. It took me 10 minutes to plug in the drive. Inside were folders labeled like a courtroom exhibit list: HR complaints, inter-office correspondence, annotated memos, screenshots, Vincent, screenshot text threads, internal chat records, culture of fear, audio testimonials, memo re, conflict of interest. I opened one. The first document was a fake HR summary dated 4 months prior. It claimed that 2 employees had filed reports against me for sustained psychological pressure and abuse of positional leverage. Both names were real. Both had actually worked with me. But those reports never existed. Next, a memo I'd never seen before, supposedly authored by Vincent, stating that I had been overly assertive in undermining risk analysts to advance her own operational timeline. The formatting was off, his language didn't read right, and the signature block was outdated. Then the emails. One looked like it had been forwarded from my address. The text was clipped and spliced from different threads, merged into something cruel and smug. Lines like, "We'll deal with her later, and you know how to handle people like that," had been ripped out of context, stripped of timestamps, rearranged into an accusation. I knew what I was looking at. I had seen better forgeries during my defense contract audits. But this wasn't amateur. Someone helped her. The thought made me physically nauseous. And then I saw the name on the formal complaint, filed by Celeste Rourke, independent consultant. Underneath, she had styled herself as an organizational ethics contributor and contractor, citing a professional obligation to disclose long-standing patterns of abuse within the firm's leadership structure. I stared at it, stunned. Then I scrolled back up. There, buried in the metadata, was the document's origin server. It was uploaded through a firewall breach in our internal security node, a ghost domain routed through a virtual private server in Miami. I knew that IP. I had once paid to protect her from it. Celeste hadn't come to the gala to throw a scene. That had been theater. This was the ambush, a full-blown staged takedown designed not just to discredit me, but to bury me, quietly, formally, fatally. And she hadn't done it alone. That memo in Vincent's name? The headers used his clearance tag, something only senior tech staff or his assistant could access. It was too sophisticated for a freelance smear job. She had help from inside. I stared at my screen, fingers hovering uselessly over the keyboard. No one had called. No one had knocked. Vincent didn't know yet, but he would. Because halfway through the folder, marked screenshots. Vincent, I saw the line they'd been waiting for. We'll make her bulletproof. I'll take care of it. He'd sent it to me late one night, weeks ago, after I won a messy procurement fight with a hostile bidder. But in black and white, stripped of context, it looked like something else entirely. Complicity. I leaned back, the room suddenly cold. This wasn't a tantrum. This was war. The silence didn't hit all at once. It leaked in. A missed handshake here, a rescheduled meeting there. Small things, easy to explain away, until they weren't. By the third day, I noticed my calendar looked suspiciously light. Internal strategy reviews, canceled. Procurement syncs, moved without notice. Even the lunch with two engineering leads I'd mentored for years vanished from my calendar like it had never existed. I tried telling myself it was coincidence, but then I walked into the cafe on the third floor and caught two junior project managers mid-whisper. One of them stopped cold when he saw me and muttered, "That's her," before they both looked down like children who'd been caught cheating. That afternoon, I checked the organization chart. Vincent's name was gone. No memo, no public update. Just an empty line under Chief Operating Officer. I walked down to his floor and found the office dark. The photos gone. The bookshelf empty except for a single dust ring where a model satellite used to sit. Later, IT emailed me that I no longer had edit access to the internal strategy folder. Standard review protocols during pending investigations. It read, pending, like they hadn't already decided. By the end of the week, I'd gone from rising legend to cautionary tale. No one said anything out loud. That's the trick. They never do. You just start to feel it. The subtle distance between your presence and everyone else's comfort. Marcus was the one person I thought might hold the line. We had worked side by side for almost a decade. He knew every program I'd led, every call I'd made when no one else wanted to take responsibility. He once told me I was the reason he stayed in the company. So when I walked into his lab and saw him slide a report under another folder like he was hiding it, I didn't knock. I just asked, "Something you don't want me to see?" He looked up. "It's not like that, isn't it?" He stood folding his arms, but not in defiance, more like defense. "Fiona, I don't know what's going on, but people are scared." "Of what?" I asked. "Me?" He didn't answer right away. Then he said quietly, "I didn't think you'd be the type to twist power, but I guess I don't know anyone anymore." It landed like a punch. "Do you really believe that?" I asked. "I don't know what to believe," he said, "but no one's saying anything, and everyone's acting like it's true. That's all it takes sometimes." I left without another word. He wasn't the one who betrayed me, not directly, but his doubt stung more than all the silence combined. That's what this place ran on. Not loyalty, not evidence, optics. It didn't matter what was real. What mattered was what people could stomach. And no one had the stomach to stand next to someone who made the room uncomfortable, someone who reminded them how fragile reputations really were. I used to walk these halls like I owned them. Now people walked faster when they saw me coming. I wasn't suspended. I wasn't fired. I was something worse. I was untouchable. The call came at 2:14 in the morning. I was awake. I hadn't really slept in days. The name on the screen didn't make sense at first. Julian Marks. Celeste's ex-husband. We'd barely spoken in 10 years, just enough to exchange obligatory greetings at one cold Thanksgiving. He'd always struck me as calm, painfully polite, the kind of man who blinked too much when nervous. I answered. "Fiona," he said, voice low and dry. "I know it's late." I sat up. "Is something wrong?" "Yes, but not with me." He paused. "It's Celeste." I froze. "I know what she did to you," he said. "And I know it wasn't just that night at the gala. I have proof." I didn't speak. I didn't move. He kept talking. "I've been fighting for full custody of Ava. My legal team subpoenaed her cloud storage and message backups. She didn't know that. Most of it's garbage, but some of it is recordings, notes, voice memos, and one of them is about you." My skin tightened. "What kind of recordings?" He hesitated, then said, "I'm going to send you one now. Just listen." I held the phone away, waited for the ping, then pressed play. Celeste's voice came through, too clear, too controlled. She hides behind silence. All I have to do is make her crack. One moment, and the world will turn on her. Silence. Then, no one sees what she really is. They only see the finish line. I just have to move the hurdles. Another voice chimed in, a woman I didn't recognize. She asked, "What about the COO?" Celeste laughed. "Let them think he's in on it. If they see her as the mastermind, all I have to be is the whistle." The audio clicked off. Julian's voice returned. "There's more. Copies of texts, timestamps, and there's a file she created labeled Rourke Sequence, like it was some kind of campaign." I couldn't breathe. My mouth went dry, but my eyes stayed fixed. I wasn't surprised. I was furious. "How long have you had this?" I asked. 2 days, he said. I wrestled with whether I should even tell you. I figured you'd think it was a trick. "It's not," I said, flat. "She's been aiming for this for years." He exhaled. "I don't know what she told you about our marriage, but she weaponizes anything that doesn't clap for her." I believed him. I sat there on the edge of the bed, listening to Julian explain the steps he took, how their attorneys verified metadata, how they matched her voice with authenticated samples, how they backed everything up 6 ways in case she tried to spin it. "Why are you helping me?" I asked quietly. He didn't hesitate. "Because I don't want my daughter to grow up thinking that destruction is power." There it was. The why. The real why. When the call ended, I just sat there. Phone on my lap, mouth tight, mind racing. I wasn't broken. I was armed. I hand-delivered the envelope to legal at 8:02 Monday morning. Inside, a certified transcript of the recording Julian had sent, 3 sworn declarations from his legal team, forensic analysis linking Celeste's files to multiple timestamps and devices, and an audio authentication report signed off by an independent digital integrity consultant. It wasn't an explanation, it was a dismantling. The woman at the front desk barely looked up. "We'll pass this along to the Ethics Review Board," she said, like I was just dropping off a timesheet. I didn't ask how long it would take. I already knew. 2 days later, a memo landed in my inbox at 6:17 p.m. Conclusion. Based on the totality of evidence reviewed, the allegations are found to be unsupported. No further action will be taken. Office of Internal Integrity and Risk. That was it. No meeting, no apology, no headline. Just a 2-paragraph summary buried between a facilities update and a weekly fire drill reminder. Vincent was cleared too. I found out through HR's public directory, his status no longer listed as inactive, just blank, which said everything. I walked past his old office that evening, still empty, no nameplate, no boxes waiting to be returned, like he'd never been there at all. By Thursday, people started speaking to me again, sort of. One manager nodded at me in the elevator, another forwarded a project brief I'd been cut out of 2 weeks earlier. A few more added me back to threads they'd accidentally removed me from, but the looks, they lingered. Not hostile, not friendly. Just awkward. Like I'd been a guest at a funeral who laughed too loud. I was technically innocent now, but no one wanted to sit next to me at the table. Not because they didn't believe me, but because my existence reminded them that truth could be fragile, and fragile things made people nervous. Marcus sent me a message late that night. "I'm glad it wasn't true. I just wish I'd said that before." I didn't respond. I ran into Vincent 2 days later, underground garage just before 7 in the morning. He was leaning against his car, coffee in hand. No tie, no badge, just him. "You didn't tell me you had it," he said. "I wanted them to see it without spin." He nodded. "You were right." There was a long pause between us, the kind you don't rush. "You coming back?" I asked. "No," he said simply. "They cleared me, but they didn't ask me to return." That tells me everything. I knew exactly what he meant. They didn't want us guilty. They just didn't want to deal with us. That was the real verdict. Not from a review board, but from the way the building itself responded, reopening doors without ever saying welcome back. I left that day without clocking out, sat in my car with the windows cracked, and watched the glass towers blink under the morning sun. Vindication should have felt like triumph, but it didn't. It just felt like air, clean, but lonely. The walls were beige and humming. Hospitals always smelled like disinfectant and disappointment. I hadn't seen my mother in almost 3 weeks. She'd fallen again. Hip this time. The recovery was going slow, and the nurses said she was lucid only in the mornings. So I came early, before breakfast, before the room got noisy with beeps and monitors and schedules. I wasn't expecting anyone else to be there, but when I stepped through the doorway, there she was. Sitting beside the bed, her hands folded neatly in her lap, staring down at the floor like she'd been caught in someone else's memory. Celeste. She didn't look up when I entered, didn't flinch or leave. Just sat there in jeans and a simple sweater, no makeup, hair pulled back in a way I hadn't seen since high school. She looked older, but not weak. I stayed by the door for a moment, unsure of the rules. "She's asleep?" Celeste said quietly. Her voice was different, smaller, almost hoarse. She still didn't look at me. "I didn't think you'd come," I said. "I figured that's how it'd go," she replied, but I wanted to see her. "And I figured if you showed up, you'd decide what happened next." I stepped closer, slowly. The chair near the window was empty. I took it. We sat in silence, the kind that builds a second skin around you. My mother lay between us, mouth slightly open, machines whispering around her. Her chest rose and fell in steady rhythm, like none of this had ever touched her. Finally, Celeste spoke again. "I didn't want to destroy you," she said. "I just wanted to be you." The words didn't land like a confession, more like a bruise that had been there for years, only now turning visible. "I know," I said. She looked at me then, her face tight with something that wasn't exactly guilt, but wasn't nothing either. "I kept thinking," she said slowly, "if I could just flip the story, maybe people would finally see me. Not as your shadow, just me." I didn't respond. What was there to say to that? She nodded, as if answering her own question. "It got out of hand. I know that." "I wasn't the one who needed punishing," I said quietly. She nodded again. I stood up, ready to leave. The room suddenly felt too still. Celeste reached out, not toward me, but toward the edge of the bed, touching our mother's blanket with the tips of her fingers. "I don't expect anything," she said. "Not forgiveness. Not a clean slate. I just needed you to know I see it now." I walked to the door. Before I stepped out, I paused and turned. I walked back over to her, and I placed a hand on her shoulder. Not gently, not cruelly, just firmly, like closing a chapter. Her eyes filled, but she didn't cry. As I turned to leave, I heard her whisper under her breath, like she wasn't even sure she was saying it out loud. "I'm sorry I made you the villain." I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The envelope was plain. No return address, no stamp. Just my name in my mother's handwriting. Tight cursive, a little crooked now, like her joints couldn't quite remember what smoothness felt like. I found it on my front step one morning after walking the dog. No courier, no email ping, just sitting there like it had grown out of the concrete. Inside, a single sheet of hospital stationery. I spent so long protecting Celeste, I forgot you needed it too. No signature, no preamble, no apology, but it felt like truth. I sat down on the hallway floor, still holding the leash, and read it again. It wasn't warmth, it wasn't affection, but it was recognition. And that was more than I'd had growing up. For a long time, my mother couldn't see me without seeing Celeste's absence. And when Celeste spun out, drama, breakups, rehab, more breakups, Mom chased after her with blankets and borrowed money and reasons. I got straight A's. Celeste got escorted out of clubs at 2 in the morning. Guess which one got the midnight calls? But this note, small and quiet as it was, said the thing I'd waited half a lifetime to hear. You were invisible, and it wasn't fair. I folded the letter and slipped it into the back pocket of my wallet. I didn't know why. I just knew I wasn't letting it sit in a drawer. Later that week, I got a message from Marcus. Just one line. "Dinner at Kara's this Friday. Just a few of us. You should come." I stared at it for 5 minutes before I typed. "I don't think that's a good idea." He replied instantly. "Maybe not. Come anyway." I did. The dinner wasn't fancy. No one wore suits. Kara's kids were in pajamas watching cartoons in the next room. The lasagna came from a store. The wine was cheap, but it was warm. Laughter found its way in. The awkwardness evaporated slowly, like steam off a glass of water. Nobody brought up the scandal. Nobody brought up Celeste. It was like we all agreed, without speaking, to let the night exist outside the fallout. Marcus refilled my glass halfway through the meal and said, "We should have asked questions sooner." "I'm sorry it took proof to make people look." I nodded. Better to be late than stay silent. Before I left, I stopped at the tiny chapel across from the train station. It was mostly empty, dimly lit. I didn't go in to pray. I just needed a quiet place that didn't echo with suspicion. There was a guest book near the candles. No prompts, just space. I picked up the pen and wrote, "True justice doesn't shout. It simply endures." Then I set the pen down, walked back outside, and breathed in the night. For the first time in months, the air didn't feel like glass. The offer came through a crisp email with an old-school seal at the top: United States Department of Technology Ethics, Advisory Commission. It didn't feel real at first. I reread the subject line 3 times. Then again, slower. Invitation to serve, Deputy Director, Corporate Integrity Initiatives. There was a formal PDF attached, signed by someone I vaguely remembered from a tech accountability summit I'd once keynoted. It spoke of rebuilding trust, navigating complex power structures, and reshaping the moral center of enterprise leadership. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just leaned back in my chair and whispered one word to myself: Vincent. The confirmation came a few hours later. He had nominated me, quietly, without fanfare, without even reaching out. I booked a train to Boston the next morning and messaged him. "One more meeting?" He sent back a simple, 2 p.m., my place, no neckties allowed. His apartment was nothing like I imagined, sparse but lived in. Records stacked beside a vintage player. Framed newspaper clippings lining the hallway, none with his name on them, but all featuring projects he'd helped bring to life. He handed me a coffee when I walked in, already black, already perfect. We sat at the kitchen table like it was any other Tuesday afternoon. "So," I said, "you retired and made me your problem again." Vincent smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "I stepped down," he corrected. "I wasn't interested in returning to a boardroom that only values survival." "You could have picked anyone." I picked the only one who never looked away. We sat in silence for a minute, just letting the truth hang in the air. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet pouch. Inside was a lapel pin, simple, round, brushed steel. I remembered it. He used to wear it every time we testified before federal panels. No brand, no logo, just clean design and quiet presence. He placed it on the table between us. I wore this every time I had to speak on behalf of a truth I knew people didn't want to hear. It reminded me not to flinch. I picked it up, rolled it between my fingers. "You think I'm ready?" "I think you've already done the job. This just gives you a desk to do it from." I stood and walked to the window, watching the quiet streets outside. For years, I'd led teams, made billion-dollar calls, delivered speeches to packed conference rooms. But none of that had required the kind of courage this would. I turned back to him. "I don't want to protect institutions," I said. "I want to prepare people, the next ones." Vincent nodded. "That's why they need you." When I got back to my apartment, I sat at my desk and typed my acceptance letter. Not a legal formality, not boilerplate PR, just me, plain, decisive. I accept this position not to guard the system, but to guide the ones who will inherit it. I believe clarity can live where chaos once ruled, and I intend to prove it. Fiona Rourke. I pinned Vincent's lapel pin to the blazer I would wear on my first day, not for power, not for apology, but for the people who were told silence is safer than integrity. Not on my watch. The ballroom wasn't opulent, just clean, understated. Rows of sleek chairs lined up before a minimalist stage, no red carpets or sweeping drapes, just a lectern, a spotlight, and a bottle of water. I stood behind the lectern in a navy dress with no jewelry. The lapel pin Vincent had given me was the only medal on me. The room held maybe 200 people, rising executives, policy architects, compliance officers, all of them staring, waiting for me to turn my pain into a moral. I cleared my throat. "I'm not here to tell you what integrity looks like," I said. "You already know. You were born knowing." I didn't mention the gala. I didn't mention Celeste. I didn't mention the quiet betrayals or the boardroom absences. Instead, I talked about strength. "People will tell you integrity is about rules," I said. "But that's wrong. It's about remembering who you are when everyone else forgets. Or worse, when they pretend they never knew." They leaned in. No note-taking, just watching. "When you stand for something inconvenient," I continued, "you'll feel it in silence before you hear it in words. You'll lose invitations, you'll lose certainty, and if you're lucky, you'll lose the version of yourself that depended on them." I didn't pause for effect. I just spoke the words the way they came. I closed with one final line, something I hadn't planned until the night before. Don't aim to be unbreakable. Just aim to still be standing. The applause came slow and respectful, nothing wild, just real. Afterward, I stepped down into the mingling crowd, shaking hands and answering questions. A young man, late 20s, sharp suit but nervous posture, waited until the room thinned out to approach me. I hope this isn't too personal, he said, but how did you keep going when the world thought you were guilty? I smiled gently, because I knew I wasn't, and I didn't need the world to catch up before I kept walking. He nodded like he wanted to write it down. Maybe he would. By 9 o'clock, I had slipped out the back and into the cool night. I walked instead of calling a car, heels in one hand, bag slung over my shoulder. The monuments were lit in warm floodlights as I passed, stone and steel rising into the sky, reminders of what endured. I didn't feel triumphant. But I didn't feel afraid either. Somewhere between vindication and vengeance is something quieter. Not victory, not forgiveness. Just peace. I paused outside the Capitol reflecting pool and looked at my own reflection. I didn't look like a woman who won, but I looked like someone who didn't break. And that, I thought, might finally be enough. The wind picked up a little, tugging at my coat. I slipped the lapel pin into my pocket and turned toward home. Not whole, not healed, but sure.